It's Gwen McGlone, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can have a green thumb apartment. Now, when you hear the words herb garden, that's enough to scare anybody away from actually starting the task, because most of us don't have a backyard or any sort of wide open space to choose from. So the greatest thing about herbs is that all they need is sunshine, water, and a little bit of pruning, and they're totally happy. I'd like to tell you how you can have a green thumb and also live in an apartment. I myself live in a tiny two-bedroom apartment with animals, and there is no backyard to speak of. And that being said, though, I have at least three windows in my house that get plenty of sunlight for herbs. Now, most of my information comes from a particular herb book called The Reader's Digest, the complete illustrative book of herbs. And I have a few other books, one of them also being out of the Reader's Digest. It's called The A to Z Guide, Herbs, Gardening, Cooking, and Health. And then the last one is Herbs, Guide to Plants by Weldon Owen, and they're my main source of information. Now, I've chosen three of the most common herbs that are used in the kitchen, which are basil, rosemary, and mint. Now, there are a couple others, but these three in particular, I figured you guys would be able to use them in pretty much most cooking. So, I'm going to explain how you can plant them, how you take care of them, how you harvest and store them, and their practical and medicinal uses. So, let's get started. Now, basil. There are about 64 different species of basil. There are quite a few of them. Now, they're annuals, so you gotta plant them every year. And with basil in particular, they're used in a lot of Italian cooking. There's almost, I would say, probably no dish that doesn't have basil in it if it's an Italian dish. And when you plant basil, they need rich, moist soil with well porous and ventilated pots so you can actually get the water out of them. And they typically grow to about 2 feet. So with basil in particular, regular pruning is enough to promote really good growth for them. And now we move on to rosemary. Now, rosemary has some interesting qualities. During World War II, rosemary and juniper berries were burnt in French hospitals to kill germs. And another thing with rosemary is that it's also considered an herb of remembrance. And in New Zealand and Australia in particular, on April 25th, which is called Anzac Day, the veterans wear rosemary in their lapels to remember their fallen comrades from World War I. Another cool thing about rosemary is during the Black Plague outbreak in Europe, there was a particular oil called thieves' oil, or the four thieves' oil. And these thieves invented this particular oil to wear on their hands and body in order to not contract the Black Plague so they could steal the riches off the dead bodies. Kind of sick and twisted, but interesting enough. So when you plant rosemary in particular likes well, grainy, dry soil. And the reason why is because it can suffer from fungal root if it has too moist of soil. So you always want to get something that's a little more fine grit. And the bushes respond well to shaping and regular pruning. As far as rosemary goes, it needs light, a little bit of watering, and it's totally happy. And porous pots, as opposed to plastic pots, are preferred for rosemary so that I can get all the water drained away from the roots. And we'll move on to mint. Now, mint is a very invasive herb, so it needs to be kept in its own pot, preferably a larger one because it tends to go a little wild. There are two different types of mint. There's spearmint and peppermint. And this might sound a little weird, but mint comes in chocolate, lime, grapefruit, lemon, ginger, apple, and pineapple. I'd actually really like to try the pineapple. I think that'd be interesting. Now, when you plant mint, you plant it in rich soil, and it gets about half the full sunlight, and it's happy with quite a bit of watering. And mint is one of the easiest to grab a clipping off of and plant in any pot. It grows and it's totally happy. Now, when it comes to actually choosing your pots for your plants, look around your house, see what kind of, area you might put them in. If they're on a balcony, they need to be a little bit sturdier. Concrete pots. If they're in, say, a window in the kitchen, maybe a hanging basket might be better. Keep it about eye level so that you don't forget it. And usually, terracotta pots are the most common among gardeners because they're basic, they don't have fancy patterns, and they are porous enough to where they drain water away nicely enough from the plants. Polyethylene and fiberglass are another option as opposed to plastic, and they're, some of them are UV, scratch resistant, and they do hold moisture a little bit better than terracotta pots do, but you have to research your herb and figure out how much moisture it actually needs before you buy your pot. Now, potting mix is also another really important thing when you're indoors, because normally when you put your herbs into the ground, they get the nutrients from the soil. But of course, when they're in a pot, they don't get that. So when you go into the store and you're buying all your supplies, you get the potting mix, not the gardening mix, because the potting mix actually has all the nutrients that you need. And move on to more for potting. Now, again, like I said, with rosemary, it requires a more gritty soil, so I would have to get something separate for rosemary in particular. Now, as I had said earlier, hanging pots are an alternative. Hanging baskets, you leave them in the window, get good sunlight. But, that's entirely up to you and aesthetically pleasing, whichever, maybe if you have animals or kids, whichever might be easier. So every year is a good time to repot your plants because you can give them new soil and give them new nutrients. Leave a plant in a pot for a couple of years, it might not be so happy after the third year. So it's always good to replant them. Now I'm going to move on to harvesting and what you can do with that. So with basil, fresh clippings and flower spikes can be used at any time from your plant. And for drying the leaves, you can cut the bushes at the base and hang them upside down in a well-ventilated, dry place. And then once the leaves are all dry, you can strip them off and sit them in an airtight container and store them in a cool place. And the best thing with basil is you can harvest it weekly and then freeze the leaves for the best flavor. Now for rosemary, you can take them pretty much at any time if it's in a warmer climate, and the leaves can be stripped and sealed in an airtight container. Major harvesting, though, should be done before the plant flowers, just preserves the flavor better. And with mint, you can cut the stems and dry them in a warm, airy place out of direct sunlight. And then once the leaves are all crumbled and dry, you seal them in an airtight container and store them away for later. And now when you cook them, basil, in particular sweet basil, is the most common type that's used in pretty much any recipe. It's going to be, when people say basil in a recipe, they mean sweet basil. And the most famous use for basil is in Italian pesto. It's one of the main ingredients. You can't make pesto without basil. Now, when you chop basil leaves, unfortunately, it bruises the leaves and they end up losing their flavor. The best thing to do with them is to tear them up with your hands. Now, young leaves, of course, have the best flavor. And if you do have dried leaves, they're just older leaves. Their texture is just a little more coarse and their flavor is a little more strong. Now, with rosemary, you can use the flowers and the stems just about any time to impart flavor into your meals. You gotta be careful though, because rosemary can really overpower different tastes, depending. You can use the flowers and garnishes in salad, and stems can be stripped of most of their leaves and skewered with meat of your choice to be put on the grill in order to impart their flavor. And leaves can also be chopped very finely to be added as a topping to a pizza. The best way, of course, to use rosemary is fresh. When it's dried, it has about the same taste, but its texture gets very coarse, and even after long cooking, it doesn't actually soften. So, again, rosemary is also a common herb in Italian cooking, and it pairs up well with starches, such as potatoes, bread, and it pairs well with strong flavors like wine and garlic. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use rosemary. Now, mint. Spearmint is usually the typical one that is used in most recipes, and it's classically flavors lamb and all of its accompaniments, and it goes very well with potatoes, peas, and salads. Now, peppermint is the one that's used for digestion teas, and the oil is used in ice cream, confectionery, and liqueurs. Now, as for medicinal uses, basil is actually, you can cut basil and use it to deter flies. In Greece, they do this, and they use Greek basil in particular. So when you have restaurant tables outside, they put it as a centerpiece, and it deters flies from the food. It's a natural disinfectant. It also has mild sedative properties and used to be traditionally prescribed for nervous irritability. And it has been proven to be used in managing diabetes. It's a supportive herb during stress and may improve concentration and memory. And it also helps cold, acne, nausea, migraines. It's a good herb to have if you're not feeling that great. And with rosemary, again, it's one of the main ingredients in the 4 Thieves oil. It is also a disinfectant and a deodorizer. You can use it to deter fleas from your pets. Rosemary tonic is useful for stimulating your nerves and combating general depression and fatigue and improving poor circulation. So if you take a tonic of rosemary, it will help just about anything. And the essential oil can be used for helping blood flow to the brain, which improves memory and concentration. Hence again, why rosemary is considered a memory herb. Now, mint is also an insect and critter repellent. If you plant it on the edge of your property, particularly with the leaf spearmint, it actually helps deter deer from entering your property because they don't actually like to eat it. I think it must be something with the oils in it. And peppermint is also known to ease the symptom of irritable bowel syndrome. And the essential oils of peppermint can be inhaled to alleviate discomfort of joint pain, muscle pain, and headaches. And it can also help, when inhaled, also help reduce the feeling of nausea and act as a natural decongestant. And peppermint is also actually a popular treatment for foot baths to soothe tired and aching feet. Now, I went through and taught you how to plant the herbs and where to plant them, and exactly what to plant them. I told you their cooking and harvesting uses and some of their medicinal properties. Now, I want to encourage you to give indoor herb gardens a try. It's not too difficult, even if you're not great with watering or upkeeping on the plants. It is always good to start small, and if you find you're successful, to work out from there. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade.